بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا، فإنه من يهد الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلن تجد له وليا مرشدا. اللهم آت أنفسنا تقواها وزكها أنت خير من زكاها. اللهم إنك العلي العظيم الرحمن الرحيم. طهر أنفسنا من الجهل والعجز والتكاسل والرياء، إنه لا مرشد إلا أنت نور السماوات والأرض ومن فيهن، يا رحمن يا رحيم. We start in the name of Allah, the source of guidance, the source of righteousness, and the source of light, the goodness and the beauty of the heavens of the earth, the only sure path for humanity. And without the divine guidance, indeed humanity is lost. Eid al-Fitr, the Eid that the Muslim Ummah celebrates, is just over. And I wish that it would be possible, or would have been possible, for a Muslim to live in a state of suspended belief as to the realities that surround them or her, surround him or her. But the Prophet ﷺ taught us that the Muslim Ummah is as if one body, and taught us that in this one body, if a limb hurts, then the resonance of that pain should be felt by the rest of the body. When the Prophet ﷺ said that centuries ago, it only confirmed what the Quran had already taught us, that تِلْكَ أُمَّتُكُمْ أُمَّةً وَاحِدَةً. You Muslims, your nation is but one people. And this is not a tribal affiliation or a tribal identity. We don't feel as Muslims that we are one because we are some type of political party or some type of national or ethnic or racial affiliation. But we are supposed to represent something. We are an ummah, a nation. And nation is a poor translation, by the way, for ummah, because ummah is simply a people that turn towards a path, or that find a source of sustenance and life from the same place. When the Prophet ﷺ taught us that we are but one, and when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala referred to us as believers, as one. This was not some type of nationalistic call, but rather a reminder that people that acknowledge their origin in divinity, in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, recognize that Allah is their maker, and recognize that monotheism is their path in life, and that they are mentally and spiritually linked to the Prophet Ibrahim alayhi Abraham, and all the Abrahamic prophets afterwards, and to the essential basic message of Islam, al-Hanafiyyah Samha, a way of life founded on the premise of monotheism, and a philosophical, theological anchoring of purpose and meaning, and a way of understanding existence, and a way of understanding purpose and history and in living, and a way of understanding ethics and morality, that indeed humanity, once it finds itself in that common purpose, in that common understanding, they are linked by the very fabric of divinity, which is the fabric of beauty, the fabric of the idea of justice, the idea of meaning, the idea of purposefulness, and that it teaches human beings that at a minimum, those who share that common understanding must act as sisters and brothers, as ukhwa. It is not important that they share a national flag. It is not important that they share a national anthem. It is not important that they share even a single geography. It is not important that they recognize the same leaders. What is important is the spiritual bond that unites those who say, we submit to Allah. In a sense, those who recognize that they are children of Allah, although of course that doesn't translate into Arabic very well. But once that spiritual bond is founded, it is supposed to become ingrained in the way we think of a common purpose, the way we think of the way we live and populate this earth. The idea that a Muslim live an individualistic, selfish orientation in which a Muslim worries about nothing but number one, themselves or their family, or that a Muslim thinks in a tribalistic, nationalistic fashion so that they will blindly support a group simply because they come from their same area or that they are rooted in the same family or something like that, is fundamentally inconsistent with the entire theology and philosophy of Islam. Before Islam could even talk about the brotherhood of humanity, it first, as a first step, is the brotherhood of Muslims themselves. And this is precisely why the hedonistic, materialistic transformations of Eid in our day and age, where Eid becomes simply about your nucleus family, you go to prayer, you come for prayer, you might have a meal, you worry about what happens within the borders of your house and nothing more, is like so much of what happened to religion and modernity. It's been stripped of its very soul, of its essence. Eid is a period where we contemplate the well-being of the entire Muslim nation. And we think of Muslims as one, and we sincerely hope that all Muslims get to partake in the joy of Eid al-Fitr. The very essence of Eid al-Fitr is to get beyond your individuality, to transform the lesson of Ramadan, the lessons of self-denial and sustenance and perseverance and patience, the lesson in samadiyya, the lesson in endurance, to now transform that lesson into a lesson of, into an act, into the actual mechanism of social welfare, where you open your doors to those who are needy and celebrate by sharing the bounties that Allah gave you with others around you. This, if we want to reclaim the very purpose of Eid, the very idea of Eid, this is what it is about. Eid was not like pagan celebrations. Pagan celebrations were premised on the idea of self-indulgence, that when you have a celebration, you basically get a ticket to vacation in the equivalent of Vegas. And what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. You get a ticket to simply indulge yourself in ways that you normally wouldn't, and then not feel guilty about it because it is a celebration. Well, Islam came completely with the complete antithesis of that premise. In fact, celebration in Eid al-Fitr is to celebrate the community, to act as a unit, as a whole, and to think of the weakest link in the community and extend the hand to that weakest link and embrace it. Of course, like so much in what we do in the modern age, it is sad to see the way that we stop thinking about why Allah decreed the spiritual acts and the ibadat that we perform as Allah decreed them. When Allah told us to celebrate the days of Eid, it was an exercise in the very meaning of Ummiyya, of to act as a community, as Ummah. But this is actually a side note, because if you live in this day and age, and the focus of this is not the focus of the khutbah. Rather, there has been an incident in this Eid that if you are a Muslim and you understand the meaning of the Eid, and you understand the necessity of aspiring for a common will, a common sense of purpose, and a common sense, a shared spirituality, and a shared bond between you and the rest of the Muslim Ummah. There was an incident this Eid that couldn't escape your notice. On the first day of Eid, in Sudan, there was a major massacre, yet another massacre in yet another Muslim country, and a horrendous, horrible one. Just in case for those of you who have not been following, like so many other Muslim nations, the Sudanese started demonstrating, peaceful demonstrations, demanding the right to live in dignity, the right to determine who rules them and for how long, the right to determine their own fate, which is a right that has been taken away since the age of colonialism. And like all Muslim countries that were once colonized, after colonial powers left, colonial powers installed in power military regimes that act as proxies for the former colonizers and do everything the colonizer wished to be done, basically. The response of the military in power in Sudan was to travel to Saudi Arabia, and then to travel to the Emirates, and to travel to Egypt, get the financial support of that triangle, there's three governments, Saudi Arabia, the Emirates, and Egypt, the triangle of despotism and oppression in the Middle East, the triangle that is closely allied now with Israel against the Palestinians, which is basically, in every sense of the expression, a fascist triangle, a fascist reactionary triangle. And Saudi Arabia and the Emirates and Egypt encouraged the military council in power to suppress the demonstrators and promise them financial backing and support. And exactly like the Saudis and the Emirates have done in Yemen, in Tunisia, in Libya, in Egypt, in Syria, in Bahrain, the dreams of our fellow Muslims to live in dignity and exercise their right to self-determination was mercilessly squashed. So the first day of Eid, the Sudanese military massacred demonstrators, and the death toll is over 100. One of the most painful videos that I saw was the Sudanese government was throwing bodies of murdered people in the river, in the Nile, and attaching heavy stones to them so that they would drown to the bottom in an attempt to cover up the number of people that they've murdered. They threw in the river about 40, but the bodies were discovered anyway. So the Sudanese government loaded them up on trucks and drove away. Now, it is easy for a Muslim to say, well, that's in a faraway land, that's in Sudan, what do I have to do with it? I'm not Sudanese, My neighbor is not Sudanese. We're American Muslims. Don't we have enough problems of our own? But the issue is bigger than that. Somewhere in our Muslim theology, somewhere in our Muslim consciousness, we forgot the words of our Lord to us. When Allah promised us, first Allah tells us that if you murder a soul, whoever murders a soul, وَقَتَلَ النَّفْسِ بِغَيْرِ نَفْسٍ, whoever murders a soul, it's as if they murdered all of humanity. And as I mentioned in my last khutbah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us that if a believer intentionally kills another believer, there are 3 consequences, if you remember. جهنم خالدا فيها ولعنه الله وغضب عليه. There are 3 consequences. Allah's wrath, Allah's curse, and on top of that, eternal damnation. The issue, however, to be realistic and to stop putting our heads in the sand, somehow in our Muslim theology, our religion shifted from an understanding that the biggest and gravest sin possible is the destruction of human life, because that's the pristine creation of Allah, to thinking that secondary issues of ibadat can somehow fill that gap and fill that void. If the ethic of the value of human life is degraded. So in other words, that somehow we can still talk about practicing Islam in a healthy fashion if we fail in our obligation to enjoin the good and forbidding the evil. The highest form of that is to uphold the value of human life and Muslim life. So it became all over the Muslim world. Muslims somehow, although they were raised on the idea that لا طاعة لمخلوق في معصية الخالق, that you cannot obey a human being if they command you to disobey the divine, everywhere around the Muslim world, Muslims developed the sickening conviction that an ideology could somehow forgive the extinguishing of the soul of another Muslim, or even the soul of a human being, period. That somehow, for political reasons, or for ideological reasons, Allah will understand. Allah will forgive. That the orders of a superior, and this is the biggest problem, that I as a Muslim, I can relegate my responsibility for an ethical, moral, just world to someone else or something else, and go on in a state of oblivion with my life. Somewhere, Muslims, and this you find all over the Muslim world, for instance, they'll believe that, well, if I'm ordered to kill someone, well, the person who bears the sin is the certain person who ordered me. But if I just follow orders, that's acceptable. That's fine. That same apathetic attitude that same apathetic attitude, it is the same, of the same nature, of the same philosophical bent, of the same orientation that says, for Muslims in the West, well, as an American Muslim, I can serve in the military and not worry about whether I am serving in a just war or an unjust war. And in fact, I can serve in the Air Force and I can throw bombs and kill people down on the ground, and Allah's not going to hold me responsible because, it's my superiors that told me to do that. So if I kill people in Iraq, I kill people in Afghanistan, I kill people in Syria, Allah will understand. This same ethical apathy is that convinces a Muslim to say, as long as in Ramadan I fast and I do my dhikr and I do my iqamah, it doesn't, Allah will hold me responsible for my little space, not for what happens to Muslims in Palestine, not what happens to Muslims in Yemen, not what happens to Muslims in Sudan. That's moral apathy, and it's of the same fabric. We normally don't think that it is the same virus that allows a soldier in Pakistan to kill civilians because his superior told him to do so, is the same virus that allows an American Muslim not to think about issues of social and moral and legal justice, that also allows Muslims in their conferences to sit there and spend hours about whether you wear hijab or not, but not worry about whether there is a Holocaust or a genocide in Yemen. It's the same moral illness. And it is not our religion. It is the same moral illness that makes Muslims, if someone makes them feel good during a khutbah or during a lecture, by throwing in the requisite number of subhanallahs and Allahu Akbars and taslims and salats, but doesn't raise a single issue about kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat linnas, that you are the best nation that Allah has created for people. Why? Because you pray the most? Because you fast the most? Because you celebrate Eid the most? No. تَأْمُرُونَ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ وَتَنْهَوْنَ عَنِ الْمُنكَرِ. Because you enjoin the good and forbid the evil. Now, many people write me and say, we listen to your khutbahs, then we get excited, but we don't know what to do. First and foremost, what did the Prophet ﷺ teach us? The baseline for Iman is to recognize what's wrong and what's right. And I mean this seriously, because as the Prophet ﷺ told us, that if you can change something by your hand, do it. If you can change it by your tongue, speech-wise, do it. The minimum level of faith is to at least condemn it in your heart. But beyond that, then you have no Iman. So, when we see a genocide of you see the number of civilians murdered in Yemen, you see a massacre in Sudan, and you see rapes in Syria, and you see civilians being bombed in Libya, and you see the concentration camps in China that exterminate Muslims in whole, and so on and so forth. And if your heart doesn't feel anything, then no, you are not a Muslim anymore. You've lost your Iman. That's the minimum. Is that at least that you still care, and you still want to know, and that they are at a minimum in your dua. Don't expect Allah to answer your dua if your dua basically is an exercise in self-indulgence. Allah, give me, give me, give me. But you do not care about what befalls other Muslims. Think of what an ethical human being and an ethical Muslim would be. At the minimum, they should be a part of your da'ah. The end of their suffering should be a part of your da'ah. Think, if you're from the point of view of the heavens, if the heavens sees all the suffering on earth, all these children crying and being murdered and women being raped and people starving to death, and then they see this person standing there and saying, I'm going to ignore all of this. Allah, just give me. I want, I want, I want. Would that be a moral person in your eyesight, in your point of view? As opposed to another human being who's sitting and saying, Allah, please alleviate the suffering of all those around me. That's a moral human being. So the first thing is to be a moral human being. Second thing, Allah has told us time and time and time again that the key to jihad is infaq. The key is infaq. That unless you part with your wealth, support the causes, the moral and just causes that you espouse, then Allah abandons you. In fact, if we don't spend on the causes that Allah has commanded us to spend on, Allah tells us that, promises us that mutrafiha, the wealthy in society, it's as if Allah will abandon the wealthy to every form of hedonism and self-indulgence. الأمرنا مترفيها ففسقوا فيها فحق عليهم القول فدمرناها تدميرا. That the wealthy in society will turn from spending on moral causes to self-indulgence, and then materialism will take everything over, and the doors of shaitan will be open. Which is precisely what you see has happened in the Emirat, where the government has, for all practical purposes, turned into a vulgar capitalist vulture. And the government of Saudi Arabia, where, again, the government has turned into a vulgar capitalist vulture. So the second thing, don't sit there and say, Allah, what can I do, what can I do? If Allah gave you a talent that enables you to earn money, then make money and donate that money. Because we live in a day and age where the biggest jihad is the jihad of information and mass communications and knowledge. And that jihad is very expensive. Everyone in this world that achieved any cause, any goal, did so by spending a great deal of money in communicating their cause. Look at how much money the right-wing Israeli settlers spend to make their land grab and their colonial policies and displacement of Palestinians appear just and fair. Look at how much the Mormons spend to spread their faith. Look at how much every religious group that you can possibly think of that has emerged with a semblance of respect in our world didn't do so by well wishes or activism and conferences, it did so by spending money into the field of mass communications and transformation of knowledge. And mark my words, Muslims will not be blessed by Allah and will not emerge from their horrible situation unless they learn to spend, and not spend in building mosques, because building a mosque so you can have a home in Jannah, that's a selfish act. When there is so much suffering around you, you want your own home in Jannah. When there are people that are losing their face, because shaitan is driving them insane, because their children are starving to death, and they live in tents where they freeze to death, or they are trafficked by human traffickers. Their children are abducted and sold into sexual slavery, and you're sitting there building a mosque, and you want Allah to bless that. You spend money into organizations that can help the refugees, Muslim refugees, that can protect children that are displaced, that can protect the untold number of orphans in the Muslim world, that can communicate, the organizations that can lobby and influence governments so that we can reverse the injustices in the world. Third, if Allah hasn't given you the talent of making money, it is haram in a time where so many Muslims exist in nations that were colonized. And after colonialism, they live under despotism and oppression and tyranny. Every Muslim that Allah has blessed with a life where they do not fear being arrested and gone and made to disappear, has a very heavy obligation upon them, because that's a blessing that Allah has given them as a gift, to see what لِنَرَى كَيْفَ تَعْمَلُونَ, to see what you will do with it. And it is in this day and age for every Muslim that Allah has made lucky enough not to live under tyranny and despotism. It is haram for them not to become involved socially and politically. If you truly understand what the meaning of an ummah is, and you understand what the Prophet ﷺ said when he said, you are but a single body. If your legs hurt, the rest of your body can't rest. It's like a single ummah. If one part of the body hurts, the rest of the body hurts. That's what the Prophet ﷺ said. Then you would understand that at a minimum, you would go out in demonstrations. We had a demonstration in front of the Saudi Council, and we had another demonstration about the massacre in Idlib. Syrians are being massacred in Idlib. The images of children that are sitting in iftar, during iftar, and their homes crumble on top of their heads, and they get buried alive. And we had a demonstration for Idlib. No one came. No one came. I am a law professor, and no one is as busy as I am. What that tells me is Muslims in America don't realize what will happen in the final day when Allah says, I allowed you to live in a place where you are not going to be tortured to death for standing on a corner street and holding a sign, and you didn't even bother doing that. Leave alone that, in my opinion, if Allah gave you the talent to run for office, it is your Islamic obligation to run for office. Leave alone vote. If Allah gave you the organizational skills, you have to find a Muslim organization or a Muslim group that works towards the Muslim, for the Muslim Ummah, and volunteer your organizational skills, volunteer your computer skills, volunteer your accounting skills. In other words, we are not a people, and our religion was never about simply أن تقولوا ما لا تفعلوا, that we just say what we don't do. The suffering of the Ummah, the suffering of one part of an Ummah, of the Ummah, is a test for the rest of us. We are but a single people, and it's due time that we remember that. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه ومن تبعه بإحسان إلى يوم الدين. I cannot forget to mention that it is now confirmed that some of the most prominent scholars of our age, namely Salman al-Auda, Awad al-Qarni, and Amr al-Imari, or Ali al-Imari, sorry. In the case of Salman al-Auda, he was in fact tried in secret and sentenced to death. And the rumors are still that the Saudi government plans to execute him and other scholars shortly after Eid, so we're during this time. Allahu Alam, whether they will in fact carry it out, but the sentencing to death has happened. When I was a child, I would read about stories of the martyrhood of scholars, and I would often ask my parents, how could it be that in your time this great scholar was executed? As a child, I thought that can't possibly happen, because how could it be that such a huge name that we read about, a true man of God, was put to death? And I would always look at my elders with a little bit of, you serious? You just didn't do anything? We're living in this moment again. Salman al-Auda, someone like Salman al-Auda, other than the fact that he has 20 million followers on media, social media and so on, is a man that had traveled around the world, made an extra effort to appeal to Muslims in the West, made an extra effort to think of ways of presenting Islam that would be appealing to our modern age. I will never forget the fact that when he would travel in the West, Muslim organizations of every color and kind would all compete to have the honor of having hosted him. All the Muslim leaders, and I'm not going to name which country because people will know who exactly I'm talking about, would just fight so that they could appear in pictures sitting next to him, or be the ones that introduce him, or be the ones that give a little word. In other words, all the bragging. And then now that he is at this time of great predicament and mihna kubra, all these people that I saw competing and jumping over each other to just have their names associated with Salman al-Auda have vanished. I never appeared in a picture with Salman al-Auda. I don't even think Salman al-Auda even knows my name. But it is a point of principle and morality. We had another demonstration in front of the Saudi embassy, protesting the arrest and the torture of Muslim scholars and the fact that they were tried on terrorism charges for nothing but free speech and been sentenced to death in a country that claims to be the guardian of the holy cities, the holy sites, that perpetuates a genocide in Yemen and arrests about 1,000 Muslim scholars and plans to put them to death after having executed untold others over the years. I mean, if you give you the list of people that Saudi Arabia have killed, whether Sunni or Shia, we'd stay here a very long time. How do you expect our children to grow up respecting something called Islam when they find that Muslims can coexist with injustice and ugliness as if it's natural to their faith? I expected when we had a demonstration in front of the Saudi consulate that thousands would show up. After all, this is the Mecca and Medina. And if the blood of scholars is once again spilled by the so-called guardians of Mecca and Medina, no Muslim would be able to do Hajj or Umrah in good faith without thinking of the sin of contributing money to the coffers of these tyrants. But thousands didn't show up. Thousands didn't show up. As usual, Muslims somehow think that they can coexist with injustice, with a feeling of powerlessness and apathy that is unbecoming. The people that Allah referred to, كُنْتُمْ خَيْرَ أُمَّةٍ أُخْرِجَتْ لِلنَّاسِ, you are the best nation sent to humankind. Not because you sit and do tasbih, not because you sit around and pray extra, not because you know how to dress in all the sunnah way, but because you كنتم خير أمة أخرجت للناس تأمرون بالمعروف وتنهون عن المنكر. You enjoin the good and forbid the evil. That is our function. شهداء لله قوامين بالقسط. Bear witness for Allah, establishing justice. And شهداء بالقسط قوامين لله. Bear witness for justice and while establishing divinity. That is what Allah sent, ended the holy message of the Prophets ﷺ was Khatab al-Nabiyyin Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. Because there were no longer any Abrahamic prophets, but now there was a nation of the Prophet that was supposed to perform the role that the Prophet ﷺ performed as the upholder of the divine covenant on this earth. Allahumma afu anna warhamna waghfir lana wahdina اللهم اهدنا لأقرب من هذا رشدا وانصر الإسلام وأعز المسلمين يا رب العالمين. Allah, forgive our sins, guide us to your path, and allow us to better be, and empower us to be better Muslims and understand our role on this earth. Ya Allah Rabbal Alameen wa aqim as-salah.